Call this meeting of Policy and Governance to order. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, so I look for a motion to approve.
Yep, I move that the minutes are approved.
And I'll second that, being the only other member here. All in favor?
Yay!
Thank you for voting affirmative on a motion that you presented. Moving on, this next thing on our agenda is Appendix 6. We had talked previously in this committee about Appendix 6 and changing it somewhat with the guidance of our attorney. So Steve, you can kind of...
Absolutely. So if you look, the second attachment on there, which says Grievance Procedure, is from Joe. One of the things that Attorney Holland, one of the things that he was really concerned about was that there is a clear, and actually I think it should just say for staff, sorry about that, I'll have to fix that. There's clear grievance procedures for everyone who's in any one of the 5 organized labor groups. So if you're a teacher, you're food service, you're a custodian, it's clearly laid out. But for those employees who are not, we've got a lot of off-schedule folks in technology, we've got building administrators, everybody in between there, Kim, we got a lot of people that are not represented, that there was nothing clear in any of the administrative guidelines about what do those people do. And so then what was happening, which is completely understandable, is absent another mechanism to resolve their grievances, they were going through Appendix 6. And Joe said that Appendix 6 is not really set up to deal with employee grievances. And so his suggestion was that we should write an administrative guideline, which is a grievance, and this should say for non-represented staff, and I thought that was in one of the earlier ones, but a grievance procedure for non-represented staff. So let's see if you go in here. So here it is. If a the last sentence of that first paragraph. If a grievance procedure exists under an applicable negotiated agreement, the employee shall use the procedure outlined in the negotiated agreement. So he spelled that out in there. So then this would be for everyone who's not represented, and then this would be the process that they would go through, which I'll just go through real quickly for you. So first thing is they go to their supervisor and they try to make things work there. If they can't, then they submit a formal grievance. That goes to the Director of Equity. It's got the components there, that's B, and this is what you have to put in there. He's got 10 days to respond to them, and then after that, if they look at it and say no, then they have an appeal process, and then they come to me, and then I have 10 days to respond to them, and then that decision stands, but that does not prevent them from using any other mechanism. So if there's a federal or a state mechanism that they have the ability to put a grievance through, they can do that either after they go through our grievance procedure, Joe's explaining to me, or they can do it in parallel.
Okay.
So that doesn't take that right away from them.
So my only question is, does our Director of Equity have enough capacity?
We talked about that because we talked about should HR do this, should Equity do it, and in the end, actually, Kingsley and Joe were working on this together. Joe sent some drafts over, and Joe's thought on it was, and I understand where this comes from, is that oftentimes the grievances that come through aren't, let me do it this way. A lot of the grievances that come through the associations, the 5 organized groups, are working condition issues. They're not, the ones that come through that are not part of a negotiated agreement are frequently more about relationships. So I'm feeling that there's a hostile work environment. I'm feeling that I'm being discriminated against, or there's a harassment issue or something like that. Not, I should only have to have, or I should have a 30-minute duty-free lunch and I'm only getting 20. So Joe's thought was a lot of those procedural grievances, those go through HR, but Kingsley does most of the investigations that wind up coming through from an equity standpoint. So the thought process was maybe better to channel these through there, because what he didn't want to do was wind up generating an extra step. I go to HR, I file this, HR says, oh, that sounds like a harassment issue, you got to go to the Director of Equity. Didn't want to have an extra step.
Okay.
So that was the conversation the 3 of us had. Kingsley seemed fine with it. We don't have that many of them, to be
Okay.
honest with you. So Kingsley said, yeah, that's seems like it will.
And you'll be able to meet the 10-day, because my only question, what happens if they don't get a response in 10 days?
If they don't get a response in 10 days, then it automatically kicks to me.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And is that spelled out?
I think that's just, that probably comes out of what's in the negotiated agreement.
Okay.
And you'll notice in here, we did make a change. You wouldn't have seen it because it was in a draft, but when you look at it, it says 10 working days. And I only say that because we have had instances in the past where somebody filed a grievance like the day before winter break or the day before spring break or something like that. We've had a couple of those. And then their concern is, well, how come I'm not getting an answer? And so this way, one of the things that we do now is we will tell them, Paul, thank you very much for filing the grievance. Today is Tuesday, April 3rd. 10 working days from now is Friday, April 17th, or whatever it is. And we'll spell it out for them so they know that they will get an answer on or before that date so that there isn't any confusion. Because people, even when you say 10 working days, if I don't know that the office is closed, I don't know you're not counting that date.
Right.
So we spell them out for them now.
Yeah, those were my only questions.
Yeah.
So if you change the wording of support staff.
It
Yeah.
should say non-represented at the top.
And does that first paragraph need a period at the end
Oh,
of the
yeah, it
agreement?
does. We had 3 cooks in the kitchen there. It was Kingsley and Joe and I were all editing simultaneously. So.
I don't usually do grammar, but it is typical of this committee to
Yep.
check that, so,
It
Brian
is.
rubbing off on you.
It is. It's a legacy thing, right?
yeah,
There we go.
that's my one.
All right. So it
Yeah.
needs to say non-represented and it needs a period at the end.
There we go.
Other than that, are you comfortable if we?
Yeah, other than that, I'm comfortable.
And
I
then-
asked Joe if there needed to be any changes to Appendix 6. He said no. He said that there's, you wouldn't put in Appendix 6 that this, what it doesn't do. He said you only put in there the affirmative things that it does do. And so he said, I don't think you need to change Appendix 6 at all. If somebody comes in and they say it's an employee issue, then you can say, and here's the guideline we follow for that.
And so then do we take this back to the full board for approval?
And just the grievance
So-
procedure goes
So what
back.
will happen with our new agenda is we have the meeting on the 10th, then we'll say we want to put Appendix 6 and Appendix 2 hopefully on the agenda for the 24th, because policy and governance is not going to be in the
Yep.
second meeting, and then we
Yep.
would
Okay,
discuss it.
great.
That is that.
So speaking of Appendix 2, these are updated with the changes that we discussed at the board table.
And all of the suggestions that Lori sent to us.
Yes.
So I think that both are in there. I've gone over it several times. Hopefully I didn't miss any periods in there. I went through the email that was forwarded a couple of times to make sure that I have all of her stuff in there.
And what her changes she wanted up from the board table?
There were some times where it didn't say exempt, so she wanted that in
Right.
there. There was some redundant clauses that she wanted pulled out, so
Okay.
I
We
think
changed February to June.
February, June.
Yeah,
So I think now everything, and then the other thing, she wanted to make sure everything was parallel, that the language was all the same, so I went through and I read it. It's hard to read in red, but I think all the language is now the same. Directions needed, limitations needed to be directions. There's an exempt up above, like I said, that February needed to be
Yeah.
June. We needed January in there. Wait, that's not right. Why did it say January? That's not. That, okay, so there we go. In paragraph 2, there's an inadvertent January that's supposed to be October. So, it's where it says superintendent board will review progress towards these goals in January of each year. No.
but I thought it was.
It's June, October, and February are the 3.
June, October.
Oh, but did she put it in there in January? That's what
I
it
think
is.
it was
Okay.
January.
Because
All right.
we
Yeah.
want to review the progress
In January.
so that we go to
Yeah.
February, we
Yeah.
can discuss it.
Right.
Like, oh my God, did I make that? I
No,
looked
no,
at it
no.
'cause
That's why I was like,
again,
no, I think
we've
the
made multiple
January-
changes to this
'cause I think
document.
that was the one at the board table
Yeah, I think
that
you're
she
right.
brought up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I think you're right.
All right. I just looked wrong all of a sudden.
She sent me an email and I forwarded it to Steve, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks good?
Yeah,
All right.
and so we take that back and hopefully it's right this time, then the
We'll put a
last
clean
time.
copy on there, so it's not so messy when we upload it, so we'll go
Okay.
through and do all so, and we'll do that with, actually, I think that one's already clean. We'll have clean copies on there, so people can see those. It's hard to read it when there's all this strike through and all the rest of that stuff on
Sounds good.
there. All right.
The next item is West High had an editorial in their paper in February, and it was asking the district to consider a policy proposal regarding the handling of bullying and harassment cases, and it kind of went into some other things as well, including sexual assault cases and whatnot. So I sent that out to you guys to read. Prior to this, I put the link to the story on there. I also linked the West Side Student Handbook, because I think when they were referring to things in the article itself, they were actually referring to the student handbook versus
Yeah.
our actual board policy, which is a little bit different. So
Mhm.
if you notice on the board policy good conduct rule, it's pretty short and talks about serving in extracurricular activities and school activities as a privilege and whatnot. But when you get into their actual handbook, it breaks down some of the things that they were talking about a little bit more. So that was a late ad, but if you want to look at the handbook and what they're talking about, we can get into that. So I don't know, Steve, if this is something more like, student handbook is something that the schools
Right.
themselves come up with, right?
Yep.
Great.
They do, we've been working on standardization, so at the high school and the junior high level and the elementary level, that they have one set of rules so that kids in one school aren't penalized or rewarded differently than kids in another school. Page 23 is what they're referring to in the handbook. If you scroll down to that, there's where it has some specific issue about penalties under the good conduct rule. It talks about some first, second, and third offense stuff in there. And then that's where, when you look at the good conduct rule that's in the ends policy that Paul attached, there's obviously a lot less, it's a lot less prescriptive than what's in the student handbook.
Mhm.
So the student handbook is an application, if you will, of the
The good conduct.
rule and the board
Because the good
process.
conduct rule is basically out of state code, right?
Correct.
So-
Yep. So one of the things that we could certainly do with this is ask, and we've been using kind of a committee format where we have administrators, sometimes it's an AP, sometimes it's the principal, usually it's the AP, and the athletic directors from the 3 high schools, and ask them to go through from a revision standpoint and review, in this case, the good conduct rule and measure it against the policy. And I think there might be some merit in asking them to take a look at the article and take into consideration whether there's anything that needs to be changed in the good conduct rule that's in the student handbook, because it's, again, far more detailed and prescriptive than what's in code. And then one of the things that we do at the organizational meeting every year is that you approve, you probably don't remember this from your first time, you approve all the district
yeah.
handbooks, so there's an item in there that
Just
says
approve.
that, somebody makes a motion, you approve them all. There's attachments in there that are 5,000 pages long, and I'm sure everyone doesn't read through all of those, but they could take a look at that, and we've got, I think, adequate amount of time, and if they want to make some changes to it, we've got time to do that.
So would that committee would only be charged with looking at West High?
No,
Okay.
sorry, and that's why I said we bring together an administrator, it's usually an AP,
Mhm.
the athletic director, because so much of this has to deal with
Right.
those athletic issues that are raised in the article, and have them look at all 3 high
Okay.
schools, look at all 3 handbooks, make sure that there aren't gaps, make sure that
Tate
there's
doesn't have
alignment. What's that?
Tate doesn't have one,
Oh, yeah, Tate has one too.
so it's 4.
Yeah, it would be 4. I don't know if they have a good conduct rule in their handbook though.
I
I'd have
can
to
do
go
a
look.
quick
Okay.
search
Because
here.
so much of it is really laser-like applied to extracurriculars. So, and they do have extracurriculars there, but they're not the competitive
Right,
ones.
they're not competitive,
but-
but they're extracurriculars.
Yeah, but they may have one in there.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember one off the top of my head, but.
There's maybe not online.
Tate's?
Yeah.
Should have been.
There's the only thing for students listed under there is bullying and harassment and DOMA and DORA testing.
Well, that's not.
And I'm sorry, this is just for the high schools, or will we also charge them with, does the junior highs? I thought they had something in
They do, they
theirs.
model theirs exactly like the
Right.
high schools do. So
Okay.
if the high schools make a change, then the junior
Great.
highs, that's what goes in their book.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it online either.
Just going over their article, make sure it's nothing we didn't touch on.
Because one of the things that I did appreciate that was in the article was the idea that you don't want to allow students who have gone through an investigation and disciplinary process to simply find that that particular infraction isn't covered. Because that good conduct rule is kind of a universal application. So it's not like we're saying this infraction or that infraction should count, shouldn't count, they should all count.
Right.
So,
So I will make that recommendation to the admin team, get that committee together, and then if they have recommendations for changes to it, what I think I'll ask them to do is send those back to us, knowing that they'll come to us in the fall with the revised handbooks, but make sure that they get those to us ahead of time so that you have a chance to take a look at them, just make sure that it comports with what your expectations were.
then can you send me that in an email form, which I can send back to Nina
Yep.
Elkady, who
I will
I've been
do
in
that.
communication with this, just so she
Yep.
knows where we are.
I'll send the directive out to them, I will forward that directive to you, and then you can forward that to Nina.
And I'll kind of explain to her why we as a board necessarily wouldn't take up a policy change, because our policy is based on state code and then
Yep.
falls under the student handbook, which we
Yep.
don't, we do approve, but we
Right,
don't
exactly.
write
Mhm.
Yep.
necessarily.
All right?
Moving on, the fourth topic was the employee handbook policy and discussion, and it's been asked, we've been talked about this during negotiations, so Steve, if you want to comment on what we talked about.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're working on right now is, we know that there are some prohibited subjects of bargaining. They have to live somewhere. And actually, right now, at least at this stage of the game, I don't know if it stays like that, but at this stage of the game, it sounds like the associations we already have handbooks, and they're actually okay. We had talked about changing the name to a supplement instead of a handbook. At least right now, they seem to be all right with the idea that the title still stays a handbook. So we have handbook in here. It may be called something else when they're done with it. I essentially just said, let the group figure it out. I don't really care what it's called. Call it supplement, call it handbook. Because there are already some things that are in a handbook for some of the groups. Then there are these other things that have to go somewhere. So we're going to park them in whatever that thing is going to be called, meld it with those things that are already in the handbook. And then this will start to be that opportunity where if there are other things that we want to pull out, then we will have a place to put them. So it'll be a structure that's developed that we can use to help guide our work with all of our employees. So the good thing is, like I said, we've got about 460 non-represented employees in the district. So if we can create a handbook that helps us deal with the prohibited subjects that are in the collective bargaining agreements and find a home for them, which can also be applicable to those 460 that are not represented, I think we wind up with a better game plan in the end, because hopefully there's more uniform treatment of employees, and in the end we want to make sure that people are treated equally and fairly, and then hopefully this will help us govern that process.
Now, I know a big concern that we've all heard is that with the handbook, though, the fear is that it could be changed. I mean, this board is more agreeable to having things more formalized. So, yeah, as well, the administrative team, you're absolutely right.
Yep.
But, so do we as a board need to have a policy in place that dictate how those handbooks, whatever, can be changed?
And I would think that rather than dictating how the handbook is changed or not changed, we would want to dictate how the committee is set up. And I say that because we also have a health insurance committee.
Okay.
Health insurance is a prohibited subject of bargaining. So technically, the health insurance committee could meet and they could decide things, and you as a board could unilaterally ignore it. I wouldn't recommend that.
Right.
So I think one of the things that's come up as a result of this conversation is a recognition by people on the health insurance committee that they are saying essentially, hey, wait a minute, where does our authority come from?
Okay.
Because their authority really, again, is based on the goodwill of the board,
Mhm.
and through the board, the administrative team delegating that to the insurance committee. So right now, the insurance committee makes recommendations, and one of their big things is they've been working really hard over the last 8-7 years to maintain flat premiums.
Yeah.
And so one way that they maintain flat premiums is they look at our benefits and they make changes to the benefits. And so we've seen co-pays go up, we've seen them try to incent generic drugs, things like that. But those are all things that they decide at the table with reps from everybody. And they've come to realize that we've implemented everything that they've told us, but there's nothing that says that we have to. So their question that's come back to the representative groups is, we understand your idea about policy, but perhaps it should be more along the lines of, what does the committee look like? So, how is it composed? What are the expectations that we have for how it governs itself, makes recommendations? How do we act on those recommendations? What happens if a recommendation isn't acted on? That was a question that one of the associations asked me, one of the people on the insurance committee asked me was, so what if the insurance committee makes a recommendation and someone just decides no? I said, I don't know, that's never happened, so we haven't had to deal with it, but that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I think that one of the things that would be an opportunity for us would actually be to say, rather than an employee handbook policy, is we would have a committee policy for, and I don't know what we call it, probably have to talk to Joe about it, is this, I'm a little reluctant to put in there, like prohibited subjects, because I don't want to get in trouble
Right.
with
Yeah.
the state. But, so I don't know what we call it, but maybe non-negotiated. So it's a non-negotiated committee policy that says all those kinds of things about how it's formed. So I have had some conversations in particular with our ICEA leadership group. They're really interested in this concept. I said I'll bring that forward. We actually meet with them this Friday. But that's as far as we've gone with it. So I don't want to speak on their behalf. I do think they would want to participate in this dialogue and bring something back to you. I don't think we would want to write it. I think we would want to write it in concert with the people that are participating in that.
Yep.
So if you're amenable to that, I will reach out to the organized groups, talk to them about what we're thinking about. I will tell you there are a couple sticky wickets out there that we'll have to deal with, because one of the issues that came up, and they brought it up very above the board, above the table kind of thing, was should we consider proportionate membership on the committees? We don't have that right now. So right now, each negotiated group has, depending on the committee, has 1 or 2 reps on there.
Right.
Doesn't matter how many members you have, so it's more like the Senate.
Yeah.
Question that I was asked was, should it be more like the House of Representatives, where if we have 1,100 employees, should we get more seats at the table, ICEA? I said, I don't know, worth talking about. So that may be an issue that comes forward that the group we may struggle with that a little bit.
And that's something that we actually can cover, and when we go through and do, like, I can't remember which one it is, but it breaks down our committees
Right.
Mhm.
and who's on them. For
Mhm.
example, the education committee, where we say that we want 3
Yeah.
reps from the ICA
Mhm.
or whatever it is to be on there.
Yeah.
Charters.
Charters, thank you.
Mhm. So if it works with you, I will start that dialogue with each of the associations. I'll work with the insurance committee in particular, talk to those folks in there, and then we'll put a kind of a steering group together and work on a non-negotiated committee governance policy. And then once I get some feedback from them, Joe will probably have some legalese that he'll want to attach to it, so I'll run some of that content past him and see if he can give us a draft of it that we can take a look at here at the committee level. And I'm sure you'll probably see some things in there that you want us to address, and then I can take it back to him and to that group and get some feedback on that. It may take us a little bit of time to do that, just because it's the end of the year. Things
Yeah.
Yeah,
get
and
kind
I
of
think
hectic.
putting it on here was more, we're in some negotiations now, so some
Yep.
of those questions have been brought up, so at least we'll have an answer of some.
Well, I think we can reassure them that it's
Being,
of enough importance
Yes.
that we're gonna do something about it.
yep,
And being on the insurance committee for the last couple of years, it's been a good group, and I think, you're, as the board member on there, treated just like the others, so
Yeah.
it's,
But it is interesting,
Yeah.
when I was asked that question about what happens if we make a recommendation and it's not implemented, I've never had a recommendation come from you folks that we haven't put into play. So, that's a good question. I don't wanna be the first one to have to figure that out on my own.
yeah.
I'd rather have structure
I
to
keep
help us figure
forgetting
that
we're
out.
being recorded, I almost said something.
Oh.
all right, well, we're moving right along. The fifth item is a kind of an A and B. We've been asked to discuss social media and cell phone use, and so I just want to make sure we cover it. I'm going to actually start with the cell phone side of it,
Mm-hmm.
and like we've said there's a link to our June 6th meeting, 2017, where we discussed this for a good amount of time on there, and I think we didn't really do anything with it there because the talk and the decision at the time there was that it was kind of school. We wanted schools to be similar, but we
Mhm.
still wanted them to have the freedom to choose what they wanted to be able to do
Yes.
per class, or by staff. And I know with discussions I've had, and classes I've been in, through the going to Southeast Unshare School, each teacher's a little bit different, and they although cell phones can be a hassle, I'm sure at times, as long as they're implementing their whatever their procedure is and making sure it's followed. I think the students are pretty good about following it. Now, on the flip side, I think if we were to go to a ban on cell phone usage by everyone, then I think that really, when you tell kids no, you can't have that, then they're going to be real sneaky about having it in general. I actually just read an article today about how banning phones in schools are increasingly becoming a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Well, and I'd offer that one of the things that I see when I'm out visiting classrooms is it actually being used as an instructional tool. So I'll just use two examples for you. One is a program called Kahoot, and one is a program called Quizlet. It's something, Quizlet something, but it's Quizlet's on the computer. There's an app for it that's on the phone. And I've seen teachers very effectively use that as a teaching tool. During class, I was in Judith Dixon's class over at City High, and she was using Quizlet to great effect. And in her history class, I was in Nate Helwig's class. Thank you. I had to look at Paul because I was struggling with the name last time. He helped me with it. Where he was using Kahoot very effectively in his class. And so I've seen teachers use them very effectively. I think I also shared this story with Paul. I had one teacher, I was in the room. They required that the phone be out on the desk, face down.
Yep.
And when they did a transition from one activity to another, they gave the kids 45 seconds, a minute to look at their phones. And the one thing I told Paul was, from a classroom management standpoint, it was the smoothest transition I had ever seen, because every kid was glued to their phone for that 45
Was that
seconds.
Mr. Peters' class?
No, it wasn't,
Oh.
but I could see him doing it too. But I mean, literally, they were all glued to their phones for that 45 seconds. She was able to get all the things done that she needed to set up the next activity, and then she told them to put them back down. Well, I think the kids, and it was far enough into the year, I think they trusted her that if she didn't have something for them to do, she'd let them go out on their phone. But when it was time to put your phone down, then it's time to focus on me. And I thought that worked really well from a classroom management style, because she didn't have kids sneaking to see what did Ruthina text me, because I know that at some point in the lesson I'm going to be able to look at it and I'm going to be able to see that. So I thought it was a really good classroom management style. I've actually shared that with several people and said, hey, here's what I saw out there. So I think our staff are learning either how to use it as an instructional tool or how to prevent it from being a problem. So that would be what I would offer.
I mean, as a parent from somebody that was a freshman and now a senior, I have definitely noticed the change in how just city has dealt with the changes and the fact that I think the first year she started at city, they had a cell phone ban.
Right.
She was still texting me during the day.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it just didn't,
Well, you hear from the teachers, who's the number one person texting your
yes.
student? It's usually you, the
Right.
parent. So,
No, I wasn't texting
no,
her,
not
but
you,
yeah.
you,
But no,
that's
but
what
I'm
I
just
mean.
saying,
Yeah.
When you
yeah.
ask the teacher, a lot of
Yeah,
times, it's
it's
who is
usually
that?
the
Well,
parent.
yeah, it's my parent.
And what they've gone to this year is exactly what Steve has referenced. Every single one of her teachers have found a way to incorporate, they know kids are gonna use them.
Yeah.
What better way than to incorporate that into the classroom where it's not this huge distraction? So I don't know if necessarily we need to do something with cell phone policy. I like the idea of having it back
Yeah.
at the school level. Schools are dealing with it, to me, in a way. I thought the biggest concern was the bullying, social media
And that's why I was
piece.
gonna go there next with it.
Right.
There were two concerns, I think you knew the one of them was, kids take their cell phones everywhere with them, and so they take them into the bathrooms, they take them into the locker rooms, and so we've gotten a lot more aggressive about signage
Yep.
that says essentially, this is a public place and you're not allowed to have your phone out in the locker room, you're not allowed to have your phone out in the bathroom, and if we find you with your phone out in the locker room or the bathroom, we can confiscate that, because we want to make sure that kids feel safe and secure when they're in the restroom or in the locker room. So we've gotten a lot more aggressive about putting signage up. You'll see it everywhere. I just was at a school, walked into an elementary school, and I walked in, and it's one of those, one of our newer buildings where you've got the open bay, you know, where you walk around the corner, and they had signs up in there that said, no cell phones out. So even at our elementary schools, you're starting to see that. So they're very cognizant of that, and they're watching it. Then the other one, which is one that you raised, which is the bullying issue. And I think one of the things that's a real concern for us is that we know that a lot of the bullying issues don't happen at school. So a lot of that social media correspondence is happening off campus. You know, we get the kids 6-7 hours a day. Where are they the rest of the time? They're out in the community. And they tend to use their phones more when they're not in school than they are in school, because of the nature of the way life works. And our big issue with that, we just dealt with an issue last week, is does what's happening in the community wind up having a bearing on what's happening in school? So the legal term we use is there a material disruption to the educational environment? If there is, that's actually the legal justification for us to get involved in it. Because we'll have some parents that'll say, you know, why are you, district, sticking your nose in here when this is something that happened on Saturday night? Well, if it carries over into Monday in the school,
Right.
we have the right to do that. Now, if it doesn't carry over Monday into school, but a student is still clearly agitated, anxious, there's issues with whatever happened on Saturday night, our school counselors get involved in that. We've gotten law enforcement involved in that in the past, when necessary, if we are concerned about what's happening outside of school. We do involve the other kids. So if I'm sending you something on Saturday night, you're finding it offensive, we come to school on Monday, it's not preventing you or I from effectively interacting in class. There may not be a material disruption, but still it's an issue for you. So we will work with the counseling staff to bring the students in and have that conversation.
But isn't that part of the new system that we have too, that students can use the
Oh,
online
absolutely.
bullying?
Yeah,
So
I
we're-
was gonna
okay.
say that. So you know, we're using the text whatever
Yeah.
line, and to now you can take it away. That takes a, you know, if that kid's really feeling it, then
Yeah.
and they're not able to do it.
Yeah, and we want them to report that real time. I think you
Right.
guys probably know this example. It's our best example in terms of the urgency of the issue. We had a student with a severe peanut allergy, and there was, for lack of a better way to describe it, I use the term hazing. There was hazing going on with some other kids in an extracurricular activity where they put peanuts in the water bottle of the kid with the severe peanut allergy. That child was understandably freaked out by that, and that was actually our very first text that we got.
Oh, good.
And the neat thing was, because we watched that incoming text line, we immediately contacted the school. The school went out and found the kid, who filed the report. it was that student's friends that did it, but the friends really had no idea what a severe peanut allergy means. And so it was a great educational moment, but it literally, all of that transpired in one day.
Mhm.
And that happened during the school day because the kid was able to text it.
I wish we had this, I'm sorry. My child is a senior, one with a peanut allergy, and has been sort of hazed by
Yeah.
friends
Yeah.
that they rub, hers is so sensitive by rubbing things,
Yeah.
the peanut, that
Yeah.
there was nothing for her to report, have
Yeah.
to wait to get home, and then wait for her mom to deal with it, which
But we
usually
want to
wasn't-
we want to empower the kids to do that, and we know that a lot of that's a teachable moment. You know,
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of kids that are engaged in behavior which others perceive to be threatening, harassing, or otherwise inappropriate, the harasser doesn't understand the consequences of their
Mhm.
behavior, so that's a teachable moment for us.
That's good.
So,
Another reason why we can't ban cell phones,
Yeah,
as
and
Paul mentioned.
I just touch on two more things before we go to this social media, which is actually a different discussion. It was interesting to listen to the, speaking of school safety, the Parkland students talk about, or actually it was the City High video. If you watch the City High video
Yeah,
about what to do in an active shooter, the last thing they say is
text your parents.
text your parents. So, I mean, it's just that as a parent, God forbid that ever happened here, but if it did, you know, it would be, you of course are going to be the one like, you know, on there. So, and also just talking with Diane a little bit, Schumacher before this in a different meeting, we were talking about Northwest Junior High is piloting kind of a, I don't know if it's a program or how they're doing exactly, but they do have some like bags, for lack of a better term, that kids, if you take their cell phone away, that's going to be some separation anxiety.
Oh.
You can't be without the phone, you know. So they put this in the bag and they shut it, and it basically locks it, so they can't get it. And then they take it back in. It's a magnetic type of thing at the end of the day, or whenever they get their phone back, and it unlocks the bag and they get their phone. So instead of leaving it necessarily in a cell phone locker,
So then they
or
don't have
anything-
separation anxiety?
So they have it with them. They can't use it.
They can't
But
get to it, but they know where it's at.
They have
Okay.
it,
And
yeah.
City High has lockers, I think.
So does state,
Yeah, that, I don't know if they're using anymore.
yeah.
So it's just you know,
Oh,
we
that's
do have it
nice.
in one school, trying it out, and obviously there's a cost to that, but
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was gonna, what's the cost? Did you know how much that cost?
I don't know off the top of my head. Like I said, I just discussed it with Diane
Okay.
right before this meeting.
Interesting.
I like that though, because you know, that separation anxiety piece is, that's really, that's, I know it sounds kind of silly when you say it, but, and because we're immigrants into the cell phone world, right? We didn't grow up with them.
Mhm.
It's easier for us. We don't have that, but they say that kids really have that, so.
You know, part of that's, I'll just say, parents' fault. It's like, don't lose your phone, don't lose your phone, don't
Yeah,
lose your phone
yeah,
type of
that's
thing.
true.
And as soon as they don't know where it's at, that
You start
sends off a little bit of panic.
Yeah.
So, and then the last thing I'll touch on the cell phone is in that discussion from 2017, like I said, we tried to get this all kind of, not necessarily the same, but more on the same page, because we looked at everybody's policy on cell phone usage then, and they were all a little bit different. And we were kind of putting it in the acceptable use
Mm-hmm.
guidelines, but, so that's where, like I said, I don't feel comfortable with us writing policy, so that's kind of, Ruthina, if you feel the same way, I mean, there's no reason for us to
Yeah.
continue to push it unless the majority of the board says to do that, so.
Right.
We had the discussion now
Yes.
twice on it. Okay.
I am fine with that.
And then moving on to the second part. The second part is brought up a couple of times, once at the board table, once in one of our board retreats, at least those are the two times that I can recall, and I think actually once last year it was brought up. And it was more social media use by board members, and wanting a policy on more or less banning us from being on social media in educational groups or whatever it is. I did attach one from the Texas Association of School Boards, because that's about the only one that I could find that was a general guidelines for school board members and social media use. And, I read through it, and it's more, I guess, common sense, or just things that we should, if we were going to do something like this, should be in our board norms.
So,
Don't release confidential information. If you're going to discuss things on your page that are, I don't know, about a topic you're going to vote on, you can say, this is my personal feeling, that type of thing. I know the concern was being in a group or whatnot with more than 4 board members and having a conversation where it could look like it's a open meeting violation. I thought about that a lot, actually, and I think it's interesting because if you're a school board member and you're in one of the groups, many groups that are out there, and they're discussing, it's parents or community members discussing school things, it's nice to be able to hear their opinions or interact necessarily in a electronic format that may not be email or face-to-face. And if you eliminate that, that's just, the ease of use with someone commenting or talking to you directly and accessing you as a school board member. If you take that away, I think we're taking away the community's ability to communicate with us as well. I don't know. Thoughts?
one, I'm not friends with very many people that give a care about what I post on my page. But in just the community chat, I just haven't seen it where this policy could be called into question, where there's several groups that I'm members of that multiple other school board members are. And yes, I like to read the comments to see, sort of take the temperature of the community. And if I notice that board member A responded on something, and usually they're responding to correct facts, misinformation, not to get into this heated debate, I just know that I keep scrolling, even if I had something to add to that. I mean, it's common sense. I just don't then put another comment in there.
Yeah, and like I don't think necessarily we would need a policy. I think this is something that we could, if we really wanted to have any of the things that they talk about on here, it should be more of a board norm discussion. Like, this is what we should do.
Yeah, you could add that to the next retreat if that's an issue that you want to take up.
We can do that, but I'm not for trying to limit people's free speech.
Right.
So, in taking away their ability to use that speech in social media, in person, or by forwarding emails that shouldn't be shared.
I also don't have a desire to police it, because I don't know how we would.
Right. Well, because somebody else would see it, and if they didn't like what you said, they would then turn it over to the person that you're not friends with. I mean, to me, yes, we can talk about it at the next retreat. We don't need a policy. It could be considered for a board norm if that's the will of the majority of the board.
And I think the attachment that I put on there is,
That would be a great,
it's just there are 12 points that are on there, just taking some of those as norms are pretty, they're kind of more common sense.
one of the points that you have to be friends, Facebook friends with every board member.
No.
That's a little like when you're a kid and you have to go to play groups that your
I've
parents set up
just
for you.
heard that it looks bad when people aren't Facebook friends with every board member and they have some block.
One thing when I tried to research a lot of this, the only thing that I kept coming up to, aside from this one that I found, was that there are some districts out there that do have a, similar to our Iowa City Community School District Facebook page. They have a Iowa City Community School District board Facebook page,
Really?
where the board would be able to put out, whatever, this is whatever it is, here's the agenda,
And who controls that?
Exactly. Well, I would assume someone on the board, that's their responsibility, but it's not something that I want to get into either,
Okay.
but that's the only other thing I can see, but, a lot of the stuff that they're talking about is make sure in that case, you're just presenting facts or whatever it is, but.
I think one of the challenges of that is the ownership issue, because how does that transition over time? I can-
Right, yeah.
Well,
Just in knowing
but
how we have
typically
them.
with those type of pages, you have several, like you have a
Administrators.
super admin person, like somebody like Kim. And Kim can relinquish and grant admin rights to whomever, but she could never be kicked off where she could control everything.
Yeah.
That's how most of those
That'd be my
pages
problem,
are.
is that I'm not on Facebook, so that would be one of the platforms that I do not understand. So I will apologize in advance if anything that I say tonight sounds stupid.
I'll just be on Facebook tomorrow.
Well, you would, and
When
I
they're
would assume
retired.
most of those school board members would join under their school email address, and that's the only way they could access it. Once they're
Yeah.
gone, they're gone, and if you don't have that access to email anymore, you can take them off.
Yep. But no, that would be interesting if we had a board.
All right, so just kind of, I think we're good on all of our topics, so just to wrap up before we hit agenda setting, so Appendix 6 is ready to go back with the couple changes that we've
Yep.
made here. Appendix 2 should be good to get
Yep.
approval again. The West Side Story piece, Steve, you'll send me the email back on
Good
what we.
Conduct Review Committee.
Yep,
Yep.
and I will forward that on to them, and employee handbook, again, you'll start that conversation.
Yep, and I'll send once I've got that rolling, I'll send an email to the committee so you guys know that that's up and moving.
Cell phone use, we've decided that that's not something necessarily this committee wants to write a policy on, so we will report that back, along with the discussion we had, abbreviated version of the discussion we had here. And then social media, again, we'll decided that that should go on our next board retreat to discuss as a board norm. So that brings us to agenda setting. I always should have this pulled up for this meeting, but Kim, do you have?
I don't,
the-
I'm looking for it right now.
May
Well, I know the
1st?
date. I mean, the date's obviously the first, whatever it is,
Yeah.
Tuesday,
Yeah.
but
Hold on, I'm trying to remember where it is.
Wait.
we're looking for the graph of things that
Yeah.
we need to
Oh.
cover in our.
And I
should
haven't
be-
been good
let's see if
about
I-
having
Let's see if I
that
can find it quicker.
under meetings. Yeah, you probably
No, I think
can.
I have it on a board agenda. No, I don't, dang it.
Why, I think that sounded right.
Wait, I'm looking at the wrong.
I just have a question. Does P&G meet throughout the summer? Like we meet?
Not unless we don't get our work done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been, in the past, there have been a couple of years, sometimes if you look at the workload that's in there, there are
Mhm.
times when we struggled with Brian, not that it was anything to do with him. Other stuff got added to the agenda, so then the stuff we had to do got pushed back.
Okay. I was
And so
just
we got
curious.
stuck meeting so we could try to get that.
There
I
also.
mean, I don't care. I'm here.
Yeah, there also would be times when we would go through things like the ends policy, and it would be like 4 meetings worth of discussing the
Yeah.
same policy before we took it to the board, and the board would kick it back to us for another discussion. So now you're into, that's trying to get that done before.
Okay.
I thought I knew where it was, and it's not there. Wait, maybe it's here. That's not it. I apologize, like you, I should have had that.
Yeah,
up.
but I haven't attached that. That's my fault.
No,
gotta
but I
look
should
under.
have it up. I got the audit rotation, that's not what we're looking for.
Let's go. P&G.
I've got charters.
Look at November.
Oh, maybe I can just do that. How about if I search?
Oh, wait.
Policy review schedule?
Yeah, I have it.
Found it?
Yep.
What's the
I found
title?
it in your email.
Board policy review schedule.
Of course, that's why I couldn't find it. Where's the P and G in that title?
Oh, God. Okay. We're 17, 18, right? We did math and science ends
Yep.
policies,
We did
the 600
600.
series, appendix 2, 3, and 6. Levels 2A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H of board governance.
Yeah, we did the regionals.
Did we do those? And then level 2H, I, and J of superintendent directions. And then blue zones came off because,
Blue zones doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Right,
Right.
so that,
So are those out of our?
yeah, you know what, this is the old one. I'm trying to find the new one. I apologize.
yeah, that's what I found, the old one, it
Yeah,
it goes
I've
in the
got new one,
rotation.
but I can't pull it up because most of the stuff that's in the other is already done in the one that we're looking at. So I know there's a new one, and I apologize that I've just not put my hands on it right away.
Let me see if I can find this.
All right, let me try
9617
one more
was last modified. Oh, that's one I just had.
thing. I'm not finding the new one.
Ruth, you know, one thing to think about, and I don't know if this is be an agenda item or not, but we've discussed in this committee about taking a, that full look at our policies and getting rid of some and kind of narrowing them down and putting them all in one spot. So that may be a discussion that we could have if we want to do something like that. I do have a idea of maybe bringing back some former board members as a committee group that would just look at all of our policies and kind of say, maybe we don't need this one anymore. We created this one that we can throw out, and if we adopted something like the IASB.
Joe is
Policy.
all over that because Joe struggles to find things on our board policy webpage. And he would express a great deal of frustration with our current setup. And he would definitely recommend that we tackle that mess that has ends policies and directions and board policies and administrative guidelines. I mean, if you go out on that page,
Yeah,
there's a million
it's
clicks
hard.
out there,
Mhm.
and his argument is there should be one link.
Yeah.
You should have board policies.
And so-
That's it.
Anyway, I bring that up because then it wouldn't necessarily be us being tasked with going through all of those, but we have people that help
here,
write a
this
lot of
might
these
be
things that maybe could come back in and just say,
But how would that makeup of former
This is
board
it, isn't it?
members be decided? That come in and help?
I think it would, well, again, we
I
can discuss this.
found it in board
we can
docs,
decide
it's
what
called
to put
board
on an
policy
agenda item,
review
but,
schedule.
Oh, I wonder if
I think you would just extend the invitation to people and see who would be interested in doing it, because there may be people that have no desire to do it. Or you look at former makeup of the policy and
Yeah.
government.
But I haven't marked what we've done and what we
Members,
haven't
what's it
done.
called?
Board policy
See, I would
review
say,
schedule.
I think that's a great idea. I would
Is it in
wait,
your Google or is it
yeah.
on
That's what
your,
I'm looking for.
is it in your, just
But
on
we
your
can discuss it if
desk
we
if you
decide
search
that's something we
for
want to
it.
have
Try
a
there.
discuss, well, we can discuss it at policy and governance, and if we just want to have a, it's not on our agenda right now, so.
Okay,
But if we
yeah.
wanted to discuss it and just kick
I
it
would
out
say
and see
let's
that was
add
something.
that to the next agenda so we can discuss it in depth.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. And we might want to, and if you want to, that's great. If not, that's not a problem. We might want to consider seeing if Joe's available to join us, if you'd like to ask him, Kim, on that May meeting. And the only reason I say this is because I know he's got some pretty pronounced views on it because of his frustration as the corporation counsel trying to figure out what is our policy on something. And there've been a couple times where he thought he knew what the policy
What do you call
was
that?
and then discovered,
Board
no, that's not
policy.
it. So,
I don't know, what should we call that topic?
Did we talk about that one?
We did talk about it a little bit. I think we didn't really necessarily talk about it. I think Joe brought it up at one point.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
you
we did,
did.
it wasn't
Was
an
it-
agenda item I could look back at.
Yeah.
Was it in policy setup or?
Well, I think it would be, you would just take all of your policies.
Board
Policy
policy manual.
structure or something?
Structure, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, board policy structure. All right, I did find the newer one. Are you still looking, Steve?
Yeah.
Oh, I told you I found it on board docs, remember?
I think what I did is I created it and I uploaded it and I never saved a copy of it.
So we've done math and science ends policies, we've done the 600 legally mandated, we've done appendix 236,
Yeah.
board governance, 2A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, I think we did.
would have to look them up. I'm not as good as knowing all of those off the top of my head.
And then the other one is superintendent directions, H, I, and J. Maybe that's what we did.
Board governance, what did you say, two?
Board governance level 2A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H.
Oh, I do think I know where it is. As soon as we said that, oh, I think I know. I think it's over here.
Do you update these after we approve them, like with the date?
Those might be on the last sheet.
I mean, I see it in here where it says reviewed, and then the last one says, for those, say 2/13/15. So I'm just wondering, like we've talked about,
Have we talked them but not done them? God. Oh, wait, I know where I can look.
Man, the only one I can find is the one from 2016. I know that's not the updated one. I know, does the one that you found in
Wait.
board docs, does that say the 17-18 school year on the top?
Yeah, and,
When you go all the way up to the top and it shows the rotation?
Out of it.
Because if it shows the rotation, that's the right one.
Let me navigate there.
Sorry.
You're fine.
Just can't believe I can't find it.
It shows the following schedule will be used to review,
It
just
doesn't say
says 3-year.
17-18. There's,
What is it?
I have one that says 17-18 on it because it's the one we used at the beginning of the session when we talked about it. I'm sorry, I'll find
yeah,
that.
I mean, the one that I have is from an email that Kim sent to me in October.
Oh, that's probably the right one then. Will you forward that to me?
Directions. Oh, wait. I don't think we've done board governance.
I don't think we have either.
Mm-mm.
Does board governance look familiar to you at all?
What's that?
Did you look that up?
I can look back through meetings and determine for sure, but I just
I
don't
have
think
it
that
if
we
you
have.
wanna see. It's
You
like,
have to send me the link. Which one is it?
because you can't find it on our website
No.
easily, that's why we should discuss
That's
that.
what I'm like, I'm trying to look multiple places and like, can't find it.
We're gonna spend more time on this,
Yeah, I
wild
don't think
goose
we've done
chase
that.
than we spent
And
on the
the
rest of
superintendent
the,
directions.
On the rest of
the
the
rest of the
agenda
meeting
items.
together, yeah, I know.
Exactly.
I'm feeling a little awkward about that, I apologize. This stuff should not be that hard.
I sent you the link.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
What I see, superintendent directions.
I don't think we've done board governance because I think there's some stuff that we.
I don't think we have. I think we were going to, and then we put it further out.
Did you send it to Gmail?
Yes, that is the correct one. Thank you.
I don't think so.
Oh, let me look again. I'll take a quick
I
peek.
don't think your email's like me because I didn't get it.
Here, I can tell you
Yeah,
really
clean
quick.
little OhioStateSchools.org.
So 17.
Oh, got it.
Come through?
Just took for long. Yep.
So he has the right
Okay.
one. I don't know what happened to my copy of it, but we have the right one now. Because if you look at it, it says, it shows 16, 17, and 19, 20. And then 14, 15, 17, 18, 15, 16, 18, 19. So it shows the rotation in there.
No, I think then we got,
We just need to update.
I don't think we've done it, that thing that says what's been done and what's not been done, but I'm not finding that we
Really,
did
from
it
an
from
ease of
September,
reading it, I
October,
should
November,
flip-flop
December.
those last two columns, because those are kind of hard to read.
We did 2, 3, and 6. And then January, we did. not meet February. February, we did 600 series.
And we didn't meet in March.
Let me look at March.
I think we've had appendix 6 on our agenda.
Yeah, we haven't done it. Yeah, yeah, and then kept getting kicked in, so.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two things we have left to do, are the governance and the
So math, science,
superintendent
done.
directions.
600 done.
Appendix 3. It's appendix 3.
Yeah, because
We
this
did
is the one
that.
that yeah, because it shows when the duns that are on here, Paul, those are the duns from the 16, 7, or 14, 15 version of it, so
Yeah.
now we're going through them again, so which ones?
But, correct me if I'm wrong, but unless it's disappeared, appendix 3 no longer exists?
Steve, that's what we're working on revising to, presentations, discussions, or actions.
Yes.
It's the list of all the things that
Yes.
need to come before the board.
And we're almost done with that.
We are very close.
Very, very close.
So we'll
Okay.
need to cover that, maybe not the next meeting,
Right.
but.
So let me just make sure here so I can make, so we've done math, we've done science,
Superintendent direction.
600, we did that with
Yep.
Joe, correct?
Yep.
Appendix 2, we've now done, and 6 we've now done.
Mhm.
3, we can put that on for the next one. We'll have that
Oh,
ready
yeah.
to go, right? I mean, I literally, the last thing I think was the CDAC one, and then
Say that one more time,
Amy
and I
just
think we're
found a SBRC one that Leslie sent to me, so I'm gonna update that, but that's ready for May. So we'll have that for
Okay.
you in May, so appendix 3 will be done. Did we do 2 ABCD? Did we figure
Mm-mm.
that out? Sorry,
We
I was
haven't.
looking while you guys
So
were-
that's board governance,
Okay.
and then the superintendent directions are the other.
We didn't do superintendent
I
direction?
didn't see them.
But you know what, that one would go to the conversation about policy revision, because that would be part of what Joe said should not be in there. Those are things that should be in board policy. So that might be part of that conversation.
Conversation with Joe.
Yeah. Because if you go out, if you spend some quality time on the board policy page of our website, that's where Joe would tell you that we've got some work to do.
Yeah.
Because on that page, and I'm just navigating to it real quickly here.
Here we have ends, policy, boards, governance, appendices.
Yep, exactly, and he would say,
Superintendent.
and you've heard Phil say this, appendices to what? Kim and I don't know. And then the ends policy, the superintendent linkage, the directions, participation by public at the board meeting, the legally mandated board policies, the admin guidelines. Joe would tell you that there is a ton of overlap. There's occasionally things that contradict each other because it's hard for us to keep them updated. And he would really like to see a link on here, that you just have the board policies and you meld them all together. So I think that could be a huge opportunity for us as a district to really, from a transparency standpoint, to clean up what we do. So I would definitely support that.
I've worked with them for 8 years and I still have to.
Oh, yeah. Well, I
Struggled to
use
get-
the search function a lot of times.
Mhm.
Okay, so what do you have on our agenda?
I have board policy structure, appendix 3, board governance 2A through H, and superintendent directions 2H, I, and J.
Okay. So technically, if we got through all of that stuff, then we would
That's
be
it.
one of those committees that would meet as needed
Okay.
until we have to review policies again.
Right.
Okay.
Excellent. Nice work.
Mhm.
A lot done in a short period of time. And had we not had to go through the hunting and pecking process, which I will apologize for, and I'm now saving that one in some place that I can find it, we will not have to go through that in the future.
Great.
I think we just update that with some different colored done.
Yep, that's what I already did that.
Okay.
Yep. I've got that ready to roll. And I think actually what I'm gonna do, to be honest with you, is now I'm gonna start uploading that into agenda setting, so that it's always in there, and we'll just keep it in there.
I just put it on my desktop so I could do that.
All
I
right.
should be doing that because we did for a while and now I just stopped.
Well, that can, are you talking about for just our
Right,
agenda? Or
right, just for
that?
our agenda setting,
Mhm.
so that every time we come to the meeting here,
There.
we'll see it, and we can just update with what's done, what needs to be done.
It wouldn't hurt to put it in if we're gonna have a slot always in the
Oh, yeah.
second meeting, just to
Sure.
put it in there so we can reference it like here's
Yeah.
what's been
Yep.
done.
That would be a good idea.
We had talked about that, actually, one of the things we're gonna try to do, a little off topic, but actually part of agenda setting, is in the discussion section now, when there's it says the Ed Committee, the P and G Committee,
Mhm.
we're actually gonna put your agenda in there, so that you can just use your agenda to talk off of while you're in there, and the general public will be able to see it. They won't have to go back and find it. We'll just PDF the agenda and put it right in there. So that'll be an attachment that goes with each committee meeting, so that'll be our reference point for it.
All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I don't know about that. I move that we adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
All right. Great meeting, Paul. Meeting, Paul. Meeting, Paul. Meeting, Paul.